The Ombudsman has waded into Oranga Tamariki's practice of removing newborn babies deemed to be at risk, announcing what will be a third inquiry into uplifts. The practice has sparked controversy after Oranga Tamariki staff tried to take a newborn from its mother's room at Hawke's Bay Hospital last month. It is the third inquiry announced into the issue in the last 4 days. Oranga Tamariki is conducting an internal investigation, and the Children's Commissioner has launched a more general inquiry. Ombudsman Judge Peter Boshier is in our Wellington studio and joins me now. Good evening, Judge Boshier.
Good evening, Lisa.
Without predetermining anything, I'm wondering what is worrying you the most here?
Well, I think that there should be a perception of independence for public confidence. So there are two prime reasons why I've decided to investigate. One is the broader and more coercive powers that are available to me and the sort of gravitas that my office has. And that's pretty relevant to the fact that, look, there have been calls for a Royal Commission of Inquiry. There have been calls for a truly independent inquiry. So I think that what is internally happening by way of Oranga Tamariki review will inform. The Children's Commissioner's review is, of course, limited just to the uplifting of newborn Māori infants. What I want to do is look much more broadly. And the second thing is, and I'm happy to develop this if you wish, we've been given much more authority by Cabinet to conduct a complaints oversight of Oranga Tamariki, and that will result in legislation next year. And I want to get in now to be part of a process of seeing what might have been done better here, why complaints have given rise to so much discontent, and what might be done better for the future.
I just want to get a bit of a baseline here. So there have been calls for a moratorium on uplifts. Do you accept the premise that in some cases it is necessary to take a baby from its family?
Well, Lisa, I'm probably exactly the right person to answer this. I was a family court judge for 25 years and head of the court for 8. There are times when the care of a child needs to be changed from natural parents to someone else, usually members of whānau. It needs to happen to be protective. Yes, I start with a premise that there are times that it needs to happen.
Okay, so if we put that decision to remove to one side and consider the mechanics of the process, what are your initial impressions given what we have seen over the last couple of weeks?
Well, do you mind if what I do is this? I want to start with not giving views and impressions. The reason is that I don't think it's helpful in an investigation for someone like me to say we're going to investigate and at the beginning express views. I want to do it in reverse, Lisa. This is why my office is so respected. I want to start knowing what the concern is. I don't want to comment on aspects of it. I want everyone to feel this will be fair to all, and I'll form views and announce those at the end of the process.
Appreciate that. So, will you look into the reasons for a disproportionately high number of Māori babies being taken away from whānau? Will you try and establish whether that is, as some people perceive, racism or unconscious bias, call it what you will, or something else?
I think what I would prefer to do in the way that we approach this is to see why it's occurring and see whether the process of remedying what's said to be a problem is the correct one. In other words, I don't want to pretend that I myself am a social worker with the answer to all of society's problems. I do want to approach this from the point of view of looking at an agency and seeing whether it's taking into account the right factors and doing its job properly. That is what I think my focus should be.
If you are looking at whether they are taking the right factors into account, you, by, elimination, must be taking into account whether they are considering some wrong factors, like, for example, profiling, racial profiling.
I've got a completely open mind as to whether Oranga Tamariki is operating properly, efficiently, appropriately, culturally. I have a completely open mind on whether they are or they are not. Everything is on the table, and I want everyone who has a concern to feel that they will be listened to. So I want to give you that reassurance. This will be a 6-month investigation. It won't just be a quick in and out, and it will be one that doesn't dissect what happened every minute of every hour of every day on the Hastings case. Others will do that. But I want to feed it into a systemic look at where is New Zealand at on this social issue.
So then, are you going to look at uplifts? Are you going to look at all spectrums of care? Will you look into foster parents and how children are placed? Will you look at the start of the process and the end of the process?
The answer is yes. If a child is in need of care and goes into either a foster placement or grandparental care. And you see, that's the interesting thing. Of the many, many children in New Zealand who need to go into care, many live with their grandparents or other members of their family, the greatest number. So what I want to do is work out proportions. This particular case has grabbed the headlines, and I understand that. But with a cool head and an objective way, I want to see to what extent the problem exists and what needs to be done to change this particular aspect of care when there are a lot of others that I also want to look at, and they may or may not be operating as well as they should.
Okay, well, you are acutely aware that it is family court judges who sign off on these uplift orders, and your office is not looking into that part of things. It's not part of your power or process. But does someone need to look at that? If we're going to scrutinise the whole process, do we need to make sure that these orders are not given too readily or based on wrong information?
Well, again, I have two answers to that. You'll be acutely conscious that the judiciary is an arm of government which I have no jurisdiction over, and constitutionally I should not. People do not want me interfering with another arm of government. But the second is, inasmuch as courts act on information, if the information being given to courts isn't up to scratch and isn't of the standard that everyone would want it to be, that's an interest of mine, of course it is. And I don't see my looking at that as interfering in any way with the judicial process.
So to be clear, Judge Boshier, you will be looking at the information Oranga Tamariki puts before the court and the veracity of that information when they try to get these orders.
Yes, and the reason I say that is that if Oranga Tamariki has decided that it needs to get a court order, I have an interest in knowing why it's reached that stage. Look, everyone knows that a court order should be one of last resort, and I sense the public concern here was this really necessary? Wasn't there another way? And I have a completely open mind on it and don't wish to now express a view. What I do want to say is I'd like to have a good close look at that.
All right, can I also ask you this then, in your former position as Principal Family Court Judge, and you have said this today publicly, that you've always been aware of the sensitivities around this issue. Well, and you would have signed order papers like this, I'm sure, wouldn't you?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so did you ever have reservations about how the system was operating in that job?
I tell you what I did have, and that is enormous concern at the implications of what I was doing. In any case which is coercive, and where you are changing care coercively, every judge is looking at that long and hard and checking their judgment and checking whether what they're doing is the right thing. It's a very, very tough decision to make. I do want you to know that in relation to any decision like that, and for instance, child abduction is another issue where judges know that depending on whether you make an order or you don't, the consequences can be horrendous. So I think judges are conscious, Lisa, that if you don't make an order in a certain situation, and the result of that is that a baby is injured or dies, you've got to wear that. So it's very much a matter of balance when you make an order.
Just before you go then, how much do you think public criticism of Oranga Tamariki or its other iteration, Child, Youth and Family, how much is public criticism weighing on their decision-making process then? Is there a potential for them to be overcautious because of public criticism?
Well, of course there might be. And look, as you know, our motto is fairness to all. And I have to say that I do want this to be a balanced investigation so that there is fairness to all. I would not want, nor would anyone, surely, want Oranga Tamariki not doing its job in protecting children if it's worried about criticism. So I think there's got to be an ability to operate fearlessly, properly, sensitively and culturally, but it's got to be done professionally.
Pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for joining us this evening. That is the Ombudsman, Judge Peter Boshier.